let's begin then. So, Elton Dimech, I have a first question for you actually. Being 12 years here in Malta, speaking to a native Maltese person, at what point can I start calling myself Maltese when people ask where I'm from?
Either when you buy the passport. No, I'm joking. I think we treat you any other non-Maltese people, we treat you very well. So
because every time people ask where I'm from when I'm abroad, I'm like, I've been 12 years in Malta and I'm not sure.
Consider yourself Maltese.
Yeah, I'm gonna start calling myself half Maltese at least now. Yeah, thank you. Well, Elton Dimech, you're the managing director of Payhound, a company that focuses on crypto process payment and OTC trading platforms. Can you just start perhaps by just introducing yourself a little bit more and the background to Payhound?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Elton. Have quite a boring personal background, to be fair, because I've been in banking for more than 10 years before joining Payhound. I've been at Payhound for like 5 years now. At banks, I used to work at Bank of Valletta for a short period of time, but the vast majority of the other years, I've been at Sparkassa Bank Malta, which is a bank that besides focusing on funds and investment services, also opened accounts at the time for a lot of gaming companies, payment services providers, and crypto companies when there was the boom of Malta being called the blockchain island. So my main interaction there was on the onboarding and customer relationship side. So I've built quite a good network of gaming companies and payment providers at the time, and took all that knowledge when I was given the opportunity then to head and manage the Payhound company, which at the time was called MoneyBite, when it started all off. And in 2019, I then joined Payhound as the managing director. We had practically nothing in terms of people, manpower at the time, but I was not one of the founders, so there was already a product and technology that was being built at the time. I joined a few months after there was the initial activity of the company. So from 2018, when the company was founded, there was the building of the technology that is currently being in use, and in around March, April 2019, the company started operating. I joined in July of 2019, and from there on, we started trying to get traction in primarily the Maltese market, but also outside of Malta. We had obviously set up a company in Malta with a license. At the time, there was the initiation of an enactment of what is called the Virtual Financial Assets Act in Malta. So it was quite new. It was enacted in November 2018. And what happened in the service provision of crypto at that point in time, we were asked to notify the regulator, the Malta Financial Services Authority, which for crypto companies, the regulator is the financial services regulator. And we were notified, the regulator, along with obviously other service providers in Malta that were already operating at the time, that we intended to continue providing services in Malta and also be subject to what is called a transitory period until we commit ourselves to get a full license as a service provider in Malta. And there were a lot of struggles besides that, obviously, because we started in the year where COVID hit as well, and we were obviously servicing mainly the gaming sphere. There were certain businesses, because there were no sporting events, that we could have grown a lot quicker at the time, I remember, but we focused our aim mainly to get the license in Malta, to be one of the first to get the license in Malta, and that proved really well, because fast forward to today, we are by far the primary partner for gaming companies that would like to add crypto as a payment method on their sites.
Right. So you're a company born out of Malta. You specialized in Malta, and you're regulated here in Malta as well. And to that end, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, if we rewind the tape back a couple of years. So to your point here that Malta was branding itself as the blockchain island for a number of years, and the idea was for Malta to become a hotbed for the kind of most exciting crypto companies. And there was a point actually where this showed a lot of promise with Binance establishing their head offices here for a short period of time, and other crypto companies doing the same as well. Can you talk a little bit about what is the regulation? What does the regulation look like here in Malta if you compare it to other jurisdictions? And why do you think eventually, the kind of blockchain island dream didn't exactly turn out, I suppose, as the government had intended? Can you go through that story a bit?
So, in terms of the regulatory framework, I think compared to other European and other non-European jurisdictions, the regulation was quite robust. Quite robust because there are a lot of elements that come from established licenses and acts in Malta, for example, which are very similar to the Investment Services Act, which is a license if you want to provide investment services. So what we were subjected to and what we needed to comply were certain obligations that in our minds at first were going beyond what we thought was going to be expected from us. We could have gone to other jurisdictions where there were no regulation at all, even in Europe, or in other jurisdictions where there was a light touch regulation or simple registrations. But the idea of having the proximity to the Malta Gaming Authority, which was by far our main target regulator for its own clientele, and the stance that they've taken at very early stages where they wanted to allow their operators to embrace crypto and DLT technologies. In fact, they had also issued a sandbox environment allowing for operators to test crypto payments and allow for the gaming companies to start accepting player deposits in crypto. We took the risk. It was a choice on purpose, but we took the risk because we wanted to be where we are now, which is essentially the primary partner for these gaming companies. It was a struggle because the sandbox environment didn't really work well for the MGA operators. We were lucky that we had, I think, the only operators were testing with our solution, but the MGA still pushed it from a sandbox environment to an actual policy where it gained a lot of more credibility for the operators to start exploring a lot more this alternative payment method. And I must say that we are now the primary partner there for very large players in the local market as well.
Can you talk a little bit more, Elton, about the regulatory landscape in general now? If we look at Europe, for example, in our prep call, we talked about the introduction of the European-wide legislation here, MiCA, I believe, MiCA.
Yeah.
So, for example, how will MiCA kind of affect the crypto payments landscape overall in Europe? And can you talk a little bit more like what other jurisdictions are competing against Malta on the regulatory front at the moment?
Okay, so it seems that Malta, even though I told you the regulation initially as it was enacted was quite robust compared to the others, I think from a regulator's perspective, it is now proving that they made the right choice in building a very robust infrastructure, because MiCA and the regulatory framework and legislation of MiCA seems to have a lot of similarities to what we are currently as Maltese service providers subjected to, meaning from the service provider perspective, it's well and good because we don't need to make a lot of changes to what we're operating, how we were operating at the moment, whilst other European jurisdictions really need to step up their game. Before or up until now, obviously there is some deleverage between certain jurisdictions like Malta and Estonia, Lithuania, but also other jurisdictions that have taken no stance towards crypto. With MiCA, now they will have to interpose this new regulation into their legislative framework, meaning that any crypto company that is providing crypto service and earning revenue out of it and selling out itself as a crypto service provider, it will require for this company to be actually regulated under MiCA. And Malta seems to be the closest to this new legislation. So I think all in all, even though we had to suffer a bit more during these few years because we were subjected to certain things that others were not living in a crypto world, I think this will now prove us to be a very good way of marketing ourselves out there, because we have already been subjected to what this MiCA regulation will interpose on other operators that do not have the same reporting and compliance obligations that we have in Malta.
So essentially, all these various regulatory bodies that existed in Europe are now becoming moot in a sense, where MiCA is becoming harmonized across Europe.
Yeah. So what will happen is that the local legislations will be repealed and superseded by this EU-wide legislation. So every EU jurisdiction needs to allow for this regulation to be put in place in each and every EU state, which will give also some clarity on a positive note as well, because we are now, from an EU perspective, now not only from a Maltese perspective, a business that is going to be regulated, meaning that we should have access more to better banking infrastructure, be able to be considered equals to any subject person, so any company that is regulated in some way or form. Their AML obligations and compliance obligations are not really different from what we will be subjected to. So we should be treated very much as equals. And I'm hoping that this will open up certain difficulties that service providers like us normally face on a daily basis.
So, for example, every year when I do due diligence with my bank and other organizations, but that's Malta too, there's always a tick box, which is do you own crypto? And this is a dangerous tick box to
yes.
And so are you saying that now with the introduction of MiCA, when it's becoming more kind of like a robust regulation and a more kind of from an EU-wide stance on this question, will it become more acceptable from banks then to accept crypto payments and crypto transactions?
It should. So, yeah. It should be more acceptable.
Within the regulatory.
Exactly. As long as the interaction of this particular individual, for example, like yourself, you're receiving from a regulated the proceeds of crypto from a regulated business, or investing with a company that has a certain regulatory profile. That should be equivalent to a bank or a financial institution, then I think at least my opinion is that it will be become more acceptable than it is right now.
Do you see MiCA having any kind of like major impact on the iGaming industry? Because we are clearly seeing a trend towards crypto payments when it comes to the online gambling industry, particularly here in Europe. Do you think this will bring steps forward for the industry? Will it have a positive impact on customers, on operators?
I think it will. It will. The intention, I think, is to bring crypto more mainstream, and by regulating it, even though some other people don't agree with me, regulation does bring the possibility of getting it mainstream. But I think from a gaming perspective, I think the fact that the financial services regulators will now be able to license crypto companies out there, and not only on a jurisdictional basis, I am expecting that gambling authorities will start taking more of a stance towards crypto and the usage of crypto of gaming companies towards their customers and players. Meaning that what the MGA, what the Malta Gaming Authority has done in 2018, said, okay, we don't know a lot about crypto, but we're creating this sandbox to learn with the operators. Whilst other gambling jurisdictions have kept it very vague about the usage of crypto, or if they've taken a stance, usually was on the negative side, that they did not want to allow their operators to allow crypto as a payment method. I think MiCA will allow at least the possibility for these gambling authorities to assess their position and maybe turn the direction towards the acceptable way of adding this new alternative solution.
Yeah, brilliant. And so where does Payhound fit into all of this? So what services do you guys offer now? And you talked a lot about the fact that you have kind of operated within this highly regulated environment for a period of time. And you mentioned that kind of these more kind of blanket changes over Europe will have a positive impact on how you can deal with your clients and so on. Can you talk a little bit more about your USPs as Payhound and what it is that you offer your clients?
Yeah, so we normally see Payhound as not, when you talk crypto, usually you think that it's a very innovative company from a technology perspective, very cool company. But what
you seem like a cool guy, so it goes hand in hand.
But what we've tried to build is an element of trust in the company. So yes, when dealing with crypto, and when your clients are traditional online casinos that have their own expertise, but maybe handling volatile assets at any point in time might not be their forte, we wanted to provide a solution that allows them to accept crypto as a payment method if you're using processing, or if you're just receiving a payment for services rendered, or if you're a gaming provider receiving license fees from your operators in crypto, a facility to be able to instantly convert the crypto into fiat. So the operators have no real concern that they are holding crypto at any point in time if they're too frightened of holding crypto, because all that risk is shifted onto us. So we would be the counterparty of those transactions where we give you the euro in exchange of crypto that we'll take from the client. So there is a concept of trust, and obviously what you can see as well, there are very many different clients that come our way. There are the ones that have already dealt with crypto before, especially maybe in gambling jurisdictions where crypto is allowed as a payment method, and maybe they want to just replicate it on their Maltese license. But there are others that are facing issues, especially banking issues, to move money from one continent to the other, facing SWIFT issues primarily, that crypto seems to be solving very efficiently. So moving the money from one place to the other with crypto can happen in a few seconds. And you need obviously a reliable partner to be able to convert and use as a venue to convert crypto into fiat or vice versa. And that is normally the USP that we give. We are coming here in the market with a number of years of experience on a regulatory aspect as well. There are certain things within the regulatory framework in Malta which will be replicated in MiCA that should provide certain comfort to the clients that open accounts with Payhound, and that is what we want to deliver there.
Right.
The trust.
So the fundamental problem here with the SWIFT kind of payment method is that if I want to transfer money from BOV to a bank in Colombia, the money doesn't get transferred from one bank to the other. It has to go through separate banks within the network.
Exactly.
And then eventually it will lead to the money in Colombia after being transacted between many different banks, whereas the crypto solution cuts out all these kind of middle people, and it's just a transaction from point A to point B.
Agreed,
right? And that's why.
I agree. That's the idea. So with Swift, you never have a direct relationship between the remitter, so the bank's remitter, and the beneficiary bank that is receiving the money. So BOV would not have a relationship with the Colombian bank, a direct one at least. And it works with a relationship of correspondent banks that are able to deliver the message until the Colombian bank is able to receive this money. But because there are a lot more banks in between, banks usually have different risk appetites. And if you're talking about gambling, there are some banks that still don't want to take the leap and accept any form of gambling proceeds, for example. And that is what we're solving ourselves. So we have a lot of European operators, for example, that have target markets outside of Europe. Like, for example, lately LATAM was and is quite a very interesting market for gambling companies. And we accounts held with Payhound, those companies can receive payment provider settlements from outside of Europe without having to deal with the bureaucracy of Swift. And we are, as Payhound, the venue where they can convert the crypto to fiat and settle to their primary banks in Europe.
Yeah, fair enough. Very interesting how it all comes together here. So you talked about the payment processing here, but you have a second product as well, the OTC trading platform. Can you talk about that product too, and what it is? What is OTC trading?
So OTC is when you're dealing with much larger amounts of crypto being traded. So we touched upon very briefly in the comment before, where we're moving money from one continent to the other. Usually that sort of flows comes with larger volume, because you have, in a gaming context, if you're dealing with a PSP, there's PSP that is collecting local payments, and at some point needs to settle out in this case, the crypto. And what the type of conversion that happens at that stage with larger amounts is called an over-the-counter trading facility. So we have a trading desk with traders that can deal with our customer in order to convert larger amounts of crypto into fiat, or vice versa. Because we're lately seeing a surge in a scenario which is totally different, which is on the payment services providers end, because there is a lot of convergence between fiat rails and crypto rails nowadays, with payment providers making use of crypto because they're also themselves finding difficulties with their banks to be able to move money quickly from one continent to the other. So for liquidity purposes and treasury purposes, they need to make use of crypto. In this case, usually would be stable coins, so that there's no real volatility on the movement of money. And nowadays, PSPs are also settling to merchants in crypto in larger amounts, because either the merchant wants it that way, so that it shies away from any issues that they might face with their current banks, and also because it's easier to settle in crypto rather than having to go through Swift infrastructure.
Right. And so what would you say, what are the important things to keep in mind when you're choosing your crypto payment processor?
Yes.
Are there any traps to avoid? I mean, in the crypto landscape in general, it's high risk.
What I would make sure that I have right is the regulatory profile of the processor that I'm dealing with. Why? Because the crypto payment processor will need to settle funds, and they will need to settle funds to your own bank. So make sure that whoever is settling the funds has the right regulatory profile that surrounds it. Then in terms of the processor, It depends a lot on what you are trying to achieve from this. If it is an alternative payment method where you don't want to take any risk of crypto, holding crypto at any point in time, make sure that the crypto payment processor is a processor that has the functionality and availability to be able to convert instantly any crypto into fiat, so that you are, as an operator, not exposed at any point in time to crypto if you don't want to take that risk. And also make sure that the people are credible enough when you're talking about adding a new crypto payment processor, because we've all heard about stories of people running away with money. The other thing is the security aspect. The security aspect of the product should be very, very important. Ties again with the fact that if you're a company that you want to portray yourself that you have a trusted product, security is a main component of the solution. And we, for example, Payhound, have decided to become ISO certified and have been ISO certified for 2 years now, in order to make sure that we can give a stamp of our security protocols and processes on this front as well. So the credibility, the experience, so when you're talking to the crypto payment processor, make sure that they know what they're saying, because it's very important when you choose the right partner for this kind of business.
Absolutely, Elton. So it seems like you're in the right time, in the right place right now from many different perspectives as we go into the future here with Payhound. Where do you see the company in 3 years' time?
So I think this year will be a consolidation on a European aspect, with MiCA being introduced. There will be the possibility for us as Payhound to passport our license in all of the EU states. So there, with the introduction of MiCA, there is total coverage of EU, but we don't want to stop there. We want to target other continents and, if necessary, also build regulated businesses outside of Europe. LATAM seems to be the most probable market because of the surge in players and end users making use of crypto. Asia has always been, I think, as a crypto adopter, Asia has always been an interesting part. But I also don't rule out that in order to ensure that we continue to deliver service, proper service to our customers, also add other licenses outside of the crypto element, so we can provide a one-stop solution to our customers and maybe get some sort of financial institution licenses that accompanies and complements the business of Payhound that it is right now, so that customers do not need to move away from having to settle funds outside of the ecosystem.
Who needs Elton John when we have Elton Dimech in our industry? Elton, thank you so much for giving some really interesting updates on the crypto payment landscape and to your company in general. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pierre.